Hey everyone, we're looking at NoClash again today because I find their version of Quran's science apologetics absolutely fascinating. This time they're trying to persuade us that the Quran predicted supernovae and pulsars.
Hi.
Hi Claire.
Do you remember in school when we learned about the water cycle, how water evaporates then falls again as rain? But there was always a lingering question in my mind, how did water first form on our planet in the first place?
A lingering question on whose mind? Dr. Tariq Mustafa and Sumaya Bashir's? Definitely not Claire Forestier's. It's an odd choice to write this, like anything in these videos actually reflects Claire's actual thoughts. I mean, after all, she's just the mercenary presenter. This thought never likely occurred to her until the moment she read it off that teleprompter. Probably not even then. And that goes for all the rest of the stuff you hired her to say too. Apparently, she doesn't find her arguments very compelling. So, audience, just like last time, in this video it's probably going to sound like I'm debunking a bunch of random pointless crap that has nothing at all to do with the Quran, but when we finally reach the point where it all comes together into the final argument, it'll blow you away. Trust me, my jaw hit the floor so hard it hurt.
As the years have passed, physicists have been able to answer this question. One in particular, Carl Sagan, asserted that water first arrived on our planet when stars first appeared.
I'm going to need a second to process what you just said, so I'm going to address something else first. The YouTube transcript of your video, not the auto-generated one, but the one that you actually wrote yourself, says, when stars first appears. Now, that could be fine. This is probably written by someone who doesn't have English as their first language. Okay. But listen to what Claire just said.
When stars first appears.
Good job, Claire. Keep givesing zero shits as long as he keeps getting pays. Well, I think that was enough time to recover from your actual point, so let's listen carefully one more time just in case anyone missed it.
Carl Sagan asserted that water first arrived on our planet when stars first appeared.
So apparently Carl Sagan thought that the Earth existed waterless until the appearance of the first stars, which then proceeded to send water over to Earth. It's completely ludicrous to think Carl Sagan might have said anything like that, but I looked around for a quote about it anyway just for kicks. I only bothered to check the obvious places, you know, the Cosmos book, the Cosmos TV show, Pale Blue Dot, the most popular works that NoClash are most likely familiar with, as well as a few Google searches just for good measure. And of course, as you might expect, there was nothing about water itself being formed in stars, or any of the other garbage Carl Sagan is supposed to have said. So now we know why you didn't show an actual relevant quote on the screen. It's because there is no such quote. But let's look into what you showed on the screen, that famous passage about star stuff. All the elements of Earth, except hydrogen and some helium, have been cooked by a kind of stellar alchemy billions of years ago in stars, some of which are today inconspicuous white dwarfs on the other side of the Milky Way galaxy. The nitrogen in our DNA, the calcium in our teeth, the iron in our blood, the carbon in our apple pies were made in the interiors of collapsing stars. We are made of star stuff. That's the best Carl Sagan I got, sorry. So that doesn't address water directly, but if you wanted to, you could add the oxygen in our water to the list. It would serve the same purpose. You couldn't add the hydrogen in the water, of course, which is a bit of a problem if you're going to argue that water is somehow made by stars. I mean, hydrogen is 2/3 of the atoms in water. But you'll notice that this quote in no way implies that the Earth preceded the stars. In fact, that idea totally contradicts what he was saying there, which is that the elements the Earth is made from come from nuclear fusion in stars, which were born and died way before the Earth was formed from their remnants. So if I'm being honest, NoClash, I don't think there's even a quote you're misinterpreting here. I think you're just plainly making things up.
Stars aren't simply shiny things that twinkle in the night. Inside stars, a series of nuclear burning stages transform the star into an onion-like shell structure that produces heavier and heavier elements in its various stages. After the star explodes in a supernova, it leaves behind its core as a remnant. The core of this remnant is more rigid than steel.
More rigid? Well, considering that a neutron star is so incredibly dense, I would expect bending it to pose a hell of a lot greater problem than bending steel, or literally anything on Earth. Steel has no special significance to this statement. It's just a random thing to compare neutron star matter to, the same way if you describe a really big thing in terms of football field lengths, that doesn't mean it has any special relationship to football fields. You could replace the football field with anything else, fix the math, and the comparison would be equally valid. valid. Another example would be if you consider this page written by a high school student that I had to use for a recent Patreon exclusive video I made about a Muslim claim that the Earth receives the exact same amount of rainfall every year, a claim for which this page was apparently one of the sources. Therefore, the next time you complain about the enormous rainfall in the region where you live, think about how much precipitation the Earth receives, enough to fill nearly 500,000 Empire State Buildings. The mention of the Empire State Building there is just a comparison to help you wrap your head around something. It's not an invitation for you to interpret the next mention you hear of the Empire State Building as a reference to global precipitation statistics. And I'm well aware that everyone in my audience understands that perfectly well, so it seems like I'm making a completely pointless observation, but I'll just wait and see, and please stifle your laughter when you do. Or don't, whatever, I couldn't.
This remnant is the densest star known to exist in the universe. It's called a neutron star or a pulsar.
Just to clarify before we move on, not all neutron stars are pulsars. First, considering that a pulsar's emissions are powered by rotational energy, which slows down its spin over time, eventually that neutron star will cease to be a pulsar, but it will continue to be a neutron star. And secondly, if you just mean that the neutron star is necessarily a pulsar shortly after the supernova event, that's not necessarily true either. It can also be a magnetar, which is similar to a pulsar, but not the same thing. But this is all pretty nitpicky, you're not far off here, so let's move on.
This pulsar is characterized by unique characteristics. First, it's very dense. How dense?
Pretty dense. Not as dense as the writers of NoClash, but dense.
Let's put it this way. A teaspoon of matter from a neutron star or pulsar weighs as much as Mount Everest. Secondly...
Oh, let me guess. Rapid rotation? A strong magnetic field? The emission of beams of radiation from the magnetic poles?
Secondly, it punches holes in stellar disks.
Sorry, what? How in the hell is that a defining characteristic of a pulsar?
In NASA's Chandra X observatory, scientists have observed a pulsar punching a hole in a disk of gas or stellar disk around its companion star. They published this information along with an image of the pulsar on their website on July the 23rd, 2015.
Okay, where do I start? I guess with the images. First up, you've got neutron star crust is stronger than steel, with steel circled as if it's important, which it's not. As I said before, it's just an arbitrary strongish material for people to compare to, chosen just because it's commonly known. No different at all to why a football field is chosen when you're talking about lengths. Soon you're going to try to conflate neutron star material with steel. Yes, I'm serious. But obviously when they say stronger than steel, they mean it's not steel. It's something else that's stronger than steel. And you'll note that what the article actually says is that a study found that the crust of a neutron star could be 10 billion times stronger than steel. So that's not just stronger than steel, it's stronger than basically anything. And you could compare it to any other substance in just the same way. But of course, it's not really comparable to any substance made of atoms like steel because it's a neutron star. It's made almost entirely, if not entirely, out of neutrons. So it's nothing like steel. The elements in steel and everything else are made out of protons, neutrons, and electrons. And once again, I'm perfectly aware that my audience knows this. But once again, this is something I actually need to explain so that it's established for later. Alright, next image. Pulsar punches hole in stellar disk. And you've got punches hole circled, again as if it means something. The article you refer to says, this trio of images contains evidence from NASA's Chandra X-ray Observatory that a clump of stellar material has been jettisoned away from a double star system at incredibly high speeds. This system, known as B1259 for short, is comprised of two objects in orbit around one another. The first is a star about 30 times as massive as the Sun that has a disk of material swirling around it. The other is a pulsar, an ultra-dense neutron star left behind when an even more massive star underwent a supernova explosion. Researchers think that the pulsar knocked out the chunk of debris, which spans over 100 times the size of the solar system, when it collided with the disk around the massive star while traveling in its elliptical orbit lasting 41 months. An artist's illustration shows the pulsar just after having collided with the disk. So right away, this has a few obvious inconsistencies with your claim. Remember, what you're trying to establish here is that a defining feature of pulsars is that they punch holes in stellar disks. Now, I know you didn't say defining feature, you said unique feature, but if this feature is unique to pulsars, then it's also a defining feature of pulsars. Either way, the point is, what you need to establish to make your argument work is that if someone mentions a star that punches holes in things, it's a clear and unambiguous reference to a pulsar. But even the simplified, casual reader-oriented account that you're getting your information from paints this as at least partially a gravitational event. The pulsar orbited through the disk, gravitationally attracted material, and then expelled it at high speed due to its intense pulsar wind. The author's decision to say that it punched a hole is just a relatively meaningless way to try to portray the event to a lay audience in a brief headline. But the fact is that any object of significant mass orbiting through the decretion disk such that the surrounding matter accretes onto it could equally well be said to have punched a hole in the disk, since it would leave a gap in the disk just the same. The more important thing here is not so much the mundane gravitational process of punching a hole in the disk, but rather the impressive expulsion of a huge amount of material at extreme speeds, around 10% of the speed of light. So how exactly does this imply that punching holes in stellar disks is a characteristic of pulsars in the same way that high density could be said to be a characteristic of pulsars? Do all pulsars pass through stellar disks? And is a pulsar passing through one extremely different in principle from, say, a regular star passing through the disk and gravitationally punching a hole? Well, no, of course not. The pulsar might have a jet that will accelerate the material out, but the colloquial terminology applies fine in either case. Well, let's find out if all pulsars pass through stellar disks for some reason. Starting with an easy read, we have the NASA equivalent to the Chandra article, which has a quote from the lead author. "These two objects are in an unusual cosmic arrangement, and have given us a chance to witness something special." So in case it wasn't already plainly obvious, this is clearly not a typical event for a pulsar. This is a pretty unusual arrangement of objects, one which the vast majority of pulsars will never be in. And now a little bit harder read, the actual paper the claim comes from. The paper confirms my suspicion that, yes indeed, the proposed hypothesis includes a role for gravity in this event. The accretion of the matter onto the pulsar, which was what actually produced the hole, was merely gravitational, and that's not especially related to it being a pulsar. This is not a special feature of pulsars. And as for whether the authors think this is a common occurrence, the ram pressure of the pulsar wind can be responsible for clump acceleration, a hint of which is seen in our observations. No such phenomena have been observed so far. Further monitoring with CXO is needed to confirm or refute this interpretation. Oh yeah, no Clash, this happens every damn day. If I had to make a list of the unique characteristics of pulsars, I would totally put punches holes in stellar disks as number 2. By which I mean I absolutely wouldn't, because that'd make me a fucking idiot. I wouldn't normally explain my sarcastic comments, but I want to be clear.
In the form of stardust, supernovas scatter the elements that surround the core of the star and that are made through nuclear fusion by the star out into the cosmos. And these are the same elements that make up other stars, planets, and everything on Earth, including our bodies. In her research work published in 2014 in the Astrophysical Journal, Goranka Bil-Albegovic and her research team described exploding stars as cosmic cement mixers in order to explain the presence of building material in space.
Yeah, no, that paper doesn't contain the phrase cosmic cement mixers anywhere, so they did not describe exploding stars that way in it. You described them as cosmic cement mixers. The dumpster fire that is New Scientist, which I bet is all you guys actually read on this subject, also described them as cosmic cement mixers. But the paper absolutely does not. And it also is not an attempt to explain the presence of building material in space. It's not trying to explain the presence of anything. It's proposing the possibility of the presence of something, which means that the substance's presence isn't even yet known, and thus requires no explanation. And it's not a building material, except in the most asinine sense that its relatively simple composition of silicates, calcium, and water is proposed to be similar to cement on Earth, hence the term cementitious, meaning like cement. If you'd read the paper, you would have noticed that this material was neither looked for nor found anywhere in space, although it was proposed as one possible explanation for a previous observation. And now, note what's written in the conclusion of the paper. Silicates are one of the main components of cosmic dust grains. However, their precise chemical composition is not known. To the pool of possible silicate materials in cosmic dust, we have added cement. That is a high degree of uncertainty. The existence of this material in space is a purely hypothetical proposition, so this paper could not possibly be an attempt to explain why it's there. And it's not a statement that it's there, and it certainly is not a statement that cement is the primary component of cosmic dust. So nothing you just said is true.
They recorded that when the very massive stars die, they explode and litter space with a variety of elements. All the ingredients of cement have been found in such stellar remnants.
I love how I guessed before you even said that you had read this off New Scientist, and then you just straight up plagiarized a line off them. Listen.
They recorded that when the very massive stars die, they explode and litter space with a variety of elements. All the ingredients of cement have been found in such stellar remnants.
But wow, supernova remnants contain all the ingredients of cement? So what you're saying is that events that result in all the natural elements in the universe contain all the natural elements present in cement? Wow, I'm shocked.
Meaning that stardust is not just dust, it is cement-like dust, which solidifies after being mixed with water.
Stardust is cement-like dust, is it? Because even your New Scientist article says nobody has looked specifically for this material before. The team doesn't say the signals they were looking at were due to cement particles, but that they could be. That the result may explain why interstellar gas contains less oxygen than expected. And it presents a quote at the end from astrochemist Helen Fraser noting that there might not be enough calcium in space to even say there's cement out there at all. And the paper you didn't bother to look at says the same thing. From the abundance of calcium and other chemical elements, we do not expect that cement nanoparticles are a dominant species in cosmic dust. So what you really mean to say, I think, is there's water and there's calcium and there's silicon, so maybe a little bit of that might bond together into cement. But we don't know, just throwing it out there. Now, I'm not saying there's not cement in space, because I'm not foolish enough to jump to a conclusion. There may be, there may not be, I don't know. But you're saying, based on reading this one article, that there definitely is cement in space, that it's the main component of stardust, and that God's divine word says so too. Because not only are you foolish enough to jump to a conclusion, but you'll leap miles past any conclusion even slightly likely to someday be scientifically demonstrated, as long as you think that maybe it could make the Quran sound a little bit smarter. But you know what? That strategy's only going to wind up making the Quran look less scientifically accurate in the long run, as science inevitably shoves aside a large number of the facts that you prematurely bound its truth to. You are not wise people.
The oxygen synthesized in stars via nuclear reactions is dispersed with the stardust through the cosmos and combines for the first time with hydrogen to form water, H2O. And here lies the answer to the question I posed at the beginning. Where does water really come from?
Yeah, my concern with the question you posed at the beginning wasn't really about the where. It was more about the when. As in, when did the Earth get its water, and when did the first stars form relative to the Earth?
Water was formed and emerged for the first time from between the cement-like dust and the remnant star core, which is more rigid than steel, the pulsar.
Really? Water was formed for the first time between cosmic dust that someone once proposed hypothetically could contain a few cementitious nanoparticles in a ball of neutrons that is as unlike steel or any other metal as anything ever could be, and has literally nothing to do with steel aside from the fact that casual readers will perceive both of them as kinda sorta hard? Huh. Okay, well, you say the water was formed between the pulsar and the dust, implying that the dust is further away from the pulsar than the water is. That's an odd claim, since the water isn't really special. It's just one arbitrary sort of molecule that can be formed from all the different kinds of atoms floating around, and it'd be formed right alongside all the various other molecules that are formed. So what physical mechanism are you proposing that would cause a water layer to form inside a waterless outer shell of dust? That would be a remarkable discovery.
Meaning that the dust grains that float through the solar system contain tiny pockets of water, and water has been found trapped inside real stardust.
Well, duh. Water's not exactly an uncommon molecule, is it?
Scientists believe that this stardust rained down continuously on young planet Earth and brought with it the organic material needed for the eventual origins of life.
It's actually too bad you dwelt so much on your cement nonsense. It'd be much more interesting to hear about this organic material. Oh well.
The discovery of water in stardust suggests that the continuous stardust falls have acted as a continuous rainfall, which brought water to our molten planet.
Well, in the sense that water-loaded dust in the accretion disk of the early solar system was gravitationally pulled to Earth and rained down, yes. And most of the water might have come down after the Earth was mostly formed during the late heavy bombardment. But you need to remember that this still isn't really different from how the other components of the Earth were pulled together. Regardless of what fell or when, it was all just matter orbiting the sun that got pulled into the gravity well of the Earth. Yeah, but I'm rambling now. Go on.
In the Quranic chapter called Al-Tariq, or the Pulsar.
The Pulsar. Yup, classical Arabic had a word for pulsar. Take a deep breath, Muslims and ex-Muslims. We're starting the dive now, and we're not going to be up for air for a while. So, no, there is no clash. Al-Tariq does not mean the pulsar. No, there was not a word for pulsar in classical Arabic. Can you guess why that might be? Now, taking it literally, it just means someone who hits something, or pounds or knocks, and that's it. Now, in the Quran, that literal meaning is taken to figuratively refer to a person who knocks on a door at night when everything's closed up, a night visitor. And based on that, combined with context from the actual chapter, you'll usually find this translated as night star, night visitor, night comer, morning star, that kind of thing. Neither its literal nor its figurative meaning has anything whatsoever to do with a pulsar.
God swears by the star which punches holes that we are made from the showers of water.
God does indeed swear by the star. The bright star, the piercingly bright star, even. Or maybe, in the best case for you, the piercing star. Which of course would in no way imply a pulsar anyway, based on everything we've talked about previously. If you walked up to an astronomer and asked them to tell you all about stars that pierce things, or even stars that punch holes, they wouldn't start cheerfully telling you everything they know about pulsars. They'd look really confused and ask you to clarify your question. I'm sorry, but this is just not in any way a clear reference to a pulsar. Now, maybe if he swore on a star of extreme density that spins very fast and emits 2 beams of light, then it could imply a pulsar, but that's suspiciously absent, isn't it? Weird. Oh, and showers of water I'm pretty sure you pulled right out of your ass. You've got water, though. Gushing water, even. Specifically referring to male ejaculation. So that's something.
The water which emerged from between kinds of cement like dust and steel.
The verse being so weirdly translated here is that verse that's so infamous, at least among YouTube opponents of Islam. The one that's usually translated as describing semen as emanating from between the backbone and the ribs. Now, I'm not going to poke fun at that, I think that's been done to death, but let's talk about how closely it matches this, let's say novel translation. The word you've translated as cement like dust, and I'm gonna struggle with this one, is al-tara'ib, or something, and it's an archaic word for ribs. My guess is the writers got this confused with al-turab, which looks very similar and shares the same root, but which means dirt. Not dust, and certainly not cement like dust, just dirt. But even if I ignore that distinction, 2 words sharing the same root letters does not mean they're at all the same word, or Arabic would become one hell of a hard language to communicate in because it'd have barely any words to use. As for the word you translated as steel, that's al-sulbi, which is usually translated as backbone, although honestly I'm more confused about that than I am about the steel translation that you used. Sulbi literally means solid or hard, that kind of thing. So al-sulbi literally means the hard, or the hard thing, I suppose. A backbone's not particularly hard unless you've got a steel disc replacement, and I can think of at least one other place on my body that I would call the hard before my backbone, but the word can actually be used in modern Arabic to refer to steel, although that's not the most common word, and at least steel kinda makes sense to call the hard. My assumption is this is just one of those weird differences between modern and classical Arabic, and they really did use it to mean backbone in the old days, but I don't know. It'd be very strange that nearly every translation of the Quran into English says backbone if there was no reason for that. But an Arabic-speaking friend agrees that it's strange and that steel does kind of make sense, and that's about as close as I'm going to get to the truth on this right now. So I'll give you a little credit here and say that I don't think you're too far off with steel. Not like it matters at this point anyway.
The Holy Quran says, by the heaven and by the pulsar, and have you understood what the pulsar is? It is the star which punches holes. There is not a soul that does not have a guardian over it, so man must consider from what he has been created. It was created from the water ejected, that is emerging from between the steel and cement-like dust.
Well, water's not ejected during a supernova, it's formed afterwards in the resulting cloud, so I'm not sure how you figure this applies at all.
God has all power to resurrect him. It's beyond incredible that a book from 1400 years ago would mention such topics.
I agree, it's absolutely incredible. It's not credible in the least. But fortunately, that doesn't matter because in no way, shape, or form does it mention pulsars, neutron stars, stellar fusion, or any other concept from modern science. And the only way to make it come close is to mistranslate it. And I don't mean mistranslate it like you did here, because your mistranslation did not successfully make it sound anything like modern science, it just made it sound like even more of an incoherent mess than it already did. But hey, at least if you convince people it means this, then you'll get the atheists to stop making fun of God for not knowing where jizz comes from.
So when the famous physicist Carl Sagan said, "We are all made of star stuff," he wasn't speaking poetically or figuratively, he meant it literally.
Well, he was speaking poetically, but he preferred to poetically state literal truths rather than lean on the crutch of metaphor like I'm doing right now.
But before Carl Sagan's and his great-great-grandfathers were even born,
Carl Sagan's was not born! He was formed of cement and steel in a dying star!
the Quran had already told us that showers brought the elements that make up everything on earth, including our bodies, when it says, "Have you not seen that God has sent water down from the heaven to make fruits of various colours, mountains of various colours like white, red and intense black mountains?"
Hold up, are you telling me the Quran says mountains are made of water? God sent water down from the heaven to make fruits and mountains? Okay, I'll accept that. I mean, verse 35:27 doesn't actually say that, it just says the water's sent down to make fruit, which is referring to rain, of course, and then it mentions mountains as a separate thing. But hey, if you want to retranslate the Quran to suit whatever your whim is that day, I'm not gonna stand in your way if you accidentally make both the Quran and yourself sound so fucking dumb you'll say mountains are made of water. That's fine by me.
And also to make the various colours of people, moving creatures and grazing livestock.
No, that's saying that just like how fruits and mountains have different colors, so do people and animals and livestock. It's a completely childish and mundane observation, like when my little 3-year-old kid keeps telling me over and over how orange the cat is and how black and white the dog is. But nobody expected better from Muhammad, right?
In 2004, NASA sent a spacecraft called Stardust on a mission to collect cosmic dust samples from a comet to be brought back to Earth for analysis.
Claire? NASA didn't send Stardust on a mission in 2004, they sent it in 1999. 2004 was just the year of the closest approach to its primary objective.
Andrew Westphal, a planetary scientist and the study lead of this mission, said, "By analysing interstellar dust, we can understand our own origins." Mr. Westphal was right. The analysis of the cosmic dust collected yielded some informative and sometimes puzzling results about the physical characteristics of stardust, other than the fact that it is similar to cement.
The cement thing's making me cringe at this point. It's not similar to cement, at least not most of it. Just stop.
They found that it is sticky, covered in organic matter, as stated by Dr. William Revel, the Emeritus Professor of Biochemistry at University College Cork in Ireland.
A single word quote with no source, really? Well, okay, whatever. It did include some organic matter. I don't know why you chose to say covered in organic matter as opposed to that the samples contained it, but yes, there were organic compounds, which is not very surprising. If people want to know more about the Stardust samples, a good place to start is the December 15th, 2006 issue of Science.
It is soft, amorphous, not crystalline silicates, as stated by Dr. Francisca Kemper in 2004 in the Astrophysics Journal.
Wait, 2004? But Claire, the samples weren't returned for analysis until 2006. How did she comment on samples that wouldn't arrive on Earth for another 2 years, Claire? Actually, you idiots think Stardust was launched in 2004, don't you? So it wouldn't arrive for another 7 years by your dates. So if you're not talking about an analysis of the Wild 2 samples from Stardust, then what are you talking about? Well, the only thing I could find was this paper by Francisca Kemper et al. That concluded that the interstellar medium has a lower than expected amount of crystalline silicates versus amorphous silicates. But this data was not gathered using Stardust, it was gathered using the Infrared Space Observatory. So what does this have to do with Stardust, Claire? Or with your argument? Or with literally anything?
And it is dark, tar-like, as stated by Drs. Franz R. Kruger and Jochen Kissel at the Max Planck Institute in Munich, Germany.
Sticky, soft, dark. Those are the last 3 quotes you gave. Everything else was outside the quotation marks in brackets below the quotes. No sources, no details, 1-word quote mines. Seriously. You assholes take bullshitting to a whole new level.
It was also described as similar to cement by Goranka Bilabegovic in the Astrophysical Journal in 2014.
We already went through that paper. It had absolutely, positively, in every possible sense and in every conceivable universe, nothing whatsoever to do with the Stardust mission. I'm going out of my mind here, Claire.
But you know where else we can look to learn a great deal about our origins? The Quran.
God pour water on dust, and you grow like plant. God make many pretty things in many pretty colors. God am the best.
Not only does the Quran state that humans were originally created from dust,
Which we weren't.
but it also states the physical characteristics of this dust in the following verses, and they are strikingly similar to what the scientists described later. Other than its similarity to cement, the Quran describes the dust that we are created from as sticky, soft, and dark, or tar-like.
Oh, that's why you have all those one-word quote mines. You needed simplistic single-word descriptions to match the simplistic single-word assertions of the Quran. Well, you've elevated bullshittery to God tier. It's funny, though, that you had to clarify every single one of them after the fact with something more detailed so people know what it means. Almost as if those one-word descriptions are uselessly non-specific and inaccurate. But, so you said sticky meant organic compounds, right? Yeah, you know what's definitely not the cement-like dust that you read about in New Scientist's lame summary of the Bilal Begovic paper that's composed of calcium, silicon, hydrogen, and oxygen? Take one guess. That's right, organic compounds. So out the window goes your cement dust, not that it was ever in the window to begin with.
Chapter 30, verse 20. And of his signs is that he created you from dust.
I'll tell you again, humans don't come from dust. Not even if I accept everything you've said in this whole video and the last one I debunked too. That's simply not what science says, the Quran is wrong, and it's about as dumb as when Kent Hovind says we think we came from a rock. Just stop, you're embarrassing yourself.
Chapter 37, verse 11. Indeed, we created men from sticky clay.
We're not made from that either, and cement is not sticky clay regardless.
And chapter 15, verses 26. And indeed, we created man from potter's clay of altered black, smooth mud.
Hey, that's a pretty typical translation. I didn't know you used those. So hey, you know what humans really aren't made of? Potter's clay. Or cement, for that matter. Not in any way. Not if you take it as a reference to abiogenesis, not if you take it as a reference to cosmic dust. It doesn't matter how you take it. It's still just plain wrong. Just accept it. Stop running away. Learn to live with the fact that your belief system is completely wrong from top to bottom. Just be like, hey guys, I know it's all wrong, but it makes me feel so good. I like going to the mosque. I like the social aspect. Stop running away from yourself. You'll be happier. Now, to any Muslims who might still be listening, and I know it's a long shot, ThereIsNoClash are not here to help you learn the truth. All they're doing, even if your religion is true, is blaspheming the Quran by deleting God's words outright and making up new ones that they would rather he say. And recall Surah 6 verse 144. Then who is more unjust than one who invents a lie about Allah to mislead the people by something other than knowledge? Indeed, Allah does not guide the wrongdoing people. Now, if I were a Muslim and trying my best to be critical, the deliberate mistranslations would be enough to enrage me already. But it's so much worse than that, because at least if you rewrote the Quran to actually match science, there would be a point to the lies about what it says. It would be a useful lie. But NoClash fails so miserably to understand science that the best they could do was to rewrite it to match a fundamentally broken understanding, meaning that all that blasphemy was for no purpose at all other than to make the Quran somehow less scientifically accurate than it already was. And finally, I would like to read one surah of the Quran to remind the Muslims of their responsibility. This is Surah 96. Read your sources before you cite them, NoClash. In the name of your Lord who created. He created man from a clinging form. Read NoClash's sources before you accept them, Muslims. Your Lord is the most bountiful one, who taught by means of the pen, who taught man what he did not know. But man exceeds all bounds when he thinks he is self-sufficient. Self-sufficient like rewriting the Quran. Self-sufficient like dictating the facts of reality to reality from your own imagination with not a shred of evidence to support any of it. Prophet, all will return to your Lord. Have you seen the man who forbids our servant to pray? And by the way, Muslim viewers, just so you know, that ain't me. I'm not stopping anyone, but I sure am gonna speak out against all the liars until my very last breath. Have you seen whether he is rightly guided or encourages true piety? Well, right now I'm reading a Quran chapter as genuine advice, which is a little bit shocking. I know it's not quite the way Muhammad intended it, but still, pretty out of character, right? But this video broke me. I have encountered a lot of stupidity over the years, but this has got to be some of the worst. Have you seen whether he denies the truth and turns away from it? I've seen someone doing that all video long, and there are a few more behind her camera. Does he not realize that God sees all? No, if he does not stop, we shall drag him by his forehead, his lying, sinful forehead. You hear that, Dr. Tariq Mustafa? Oh hey, I just noticed you're named after a pulsar, that's neat. Well, more of a pounder than a pulsar, but same difference to you, I guess. Let him summon his comrades. Sumaya Bashir, Walid Badur. We shall summon the guards of hell. No, do not obey him, prophet. Bow down in worship and draw close. Don't obey NoClash. If you're interested in science, be interested enough to try to at least get it right. If you're interested in religion, respect yourself enough to just accept what it is. You don't need to twist the facts and make excuses, just be you. But if you really do feel the need to struggle against your religion as hard as NoClash does, maybe you've outgrown it. Maybe it's time for you to just drop it altogether. Just a thought. Thanks for watching, everyone. Here are my patrons. Please consider becoming one if you enjoy this kind of video. I plan on making more science-related content going forward because I find it really fun lately. But whether you go the Patreon route or not, I very much appreciate you watching my stuff. Have a great day.